The desert wind howled across the barren landscape of Afghanistan, carrying with it the acrid smell of gunpowder and the weight of failure. 12 of the Marine Corps' finest marksmen had just emptied their magazines at a target 800 meters away. 12 elite soldiers, trained in the most advanced shooting techniques, equipped with the military's best rifles, had fired round after round into the dusty air. Not a single bullet had found its mark. The Taliban sniper positioned in that distant compound had been picking off American soldiers for 3 days straight. He was like a ghost, appearing just long enough to claim another life before vanishing into the maze of mud brick buildings. The Marines' reputation was on the line, their confidence shattered, their mission in jeopardy. Then, from the back of the group, a quiet voice spoke up. It belonged to Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, a woman who had fought harder than anyone to earn her place among these warriors. While her male counterparts had been shouting commands and cursing their luck, she had been watching, calculating, studying the impossible shot that had defeated them all. What happened next would be talked about in Marine Corps barracks for decades to come. It would challenge everything the military thought it knew about women in combat, about who could handle pressure when lives were on the line, and about the deadly art of precision shooting. This is the true story of how one woman's single bullet accomplished what an entire squad of elite Marines could not, and how that moment changed the course of a war zone battle that seemed impossible to win. The morning sun had barely crested the mountains surrounding Forward Operating Base Chapman when Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of her M40A5 sniper rifle across her shoulders. She moved through the pre-dawn darkness with the practiced silence that had earned her the nickname Ghost among her fellow Marines, though most of them said it with a mixture of respect and skepticism that never quite sat right with her. At 28 years old, Maria had already survived 3 deployments to Afghanistan, each one harder than the last. She had grown up in a small Texas town where her father taught her to shoot before she could properly tie her shoes. By age 10, she could hit a tin can from 100 yards with his old hunting rifle. By 15, she was out shooting grown men at the local gun range. By 18, she had made the decision that would define her life. She walked into a Marine Corps recruiting office and signed her name on papers that would take her far from the dusty roads of her hometown and into some of the most dangerous places on Earth. The path had not been easy. During boot camp at Parris Island, the drill instructors had pushed her harder than anyone else, testing her resolve at every turn. They made her carry heavier packs, run longer distances, and endure verbal assaults designed to break her spirit. Some nights, lying in her narrow bunk while other recruits snored around her, Maria wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But each morning, she got up and pushed forward, driven by a determination that seemed to burn in her chest like a coal that never went cold. The real challenges began when she applied for sniper school. The Marine Corps Scout sniper program was notorious for its difficulty, with failure rates that exceeded 90%. Most of the instructors had never trained a woman before, and their doubts showed in every interaction. They questioned whether she had the physical strength to carry the equipment, the mental toughness to handle the pressure, and the emotional stability to take a human life from a distance. Maria proved them wrong on every count. She excelled at stalking exercises, moving through terrain so quietly that even experienced instructors lost track of her position. Her shooting scores consistently ranked in the top 5% of her class. Most importantly, she demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. Her heart rate barely elevated even during the most stressful scenarios. But technical skills were only part of what made a successful sniper. The psychological demands of the job-tested Marines in ways that no training could fully prepare them for. Taking a human life, even in war, left scars that never fully healed. The isolation of working alone or with just a spotter, sometimes for days at a time, drove some soldiers to the edge of madness. The weight of knowing that a single mistake could cost the lives of fellow Marines created pressure that crushed even the strongest personalities. Maria had faced these challenges during her first deployment, stationed at a small outpost in Helmand Province. Her first confirmed kill came on a scorching afternoon when Taliban fighters attempted to overrun their position. Through her scope, she watched a man in traditional Afghan dress raise an AK-47 toward a group of Marines who had no idea they were being targeted. The distance was 400 meters, well within her range, but the wind was gusting unpredictably, and the target kept moving between patches of cover. She took a breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet traveled through the hot desert air and found its mark with surgical precision. The threat was eliminated, and her fellow Marines lived to see another day. But that night, alone in her sleeping bag, Maria stared at the ceiling of her tent and wondered if she would ever feel normal again. The answer, she learned over time, was no. But she also discovered that normal was not what she was meant to be. Each successful mission, each life saved by her marksmanship, added another layer to her confidence and reputation. Her fellow Marines began to trust her abilities, though many still struggled with the idea of a woman in such a dangerous and traditionally male role. Now, beginning her third deployment, Maria found herself assigned to a new unit at Forward Operating Base Chapman. The base sat in a valley surrounded by mountains that provided perfect cover for enemy snipers and observation posts. Taliban fighters have been using these elevated positions to terrorize American and Afghan forces for months, making movement around the base extremely dangerous. The Marine stationed at Chapman were a mix of combat veterans and fresh-faced soldiers on their first deployments. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, was a career Marine with 20 years of experience and traditional views about women in combat roles. He had specifically requested that Maria be assigned elsewhere, but higher command had overruled him based on her exemplary service record and the base's desperate need for sniper support. Maria could sense the tension from her first day at Chapman. During the briefing that introduced her to the unit, she noticed the sideways glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Some of the Marines were openly hostile, making comments about how women didn't belong in combat zones and questioning whether she would be reliable when the shooting started. Others were simply curious, having heard stories about her abilities, but never having worked with a female sniper before. The base itself was a study in controlled chaos. Surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire, it housed approximately 300 Marines and support personnel in conditions that range from barely tolerable to completely miserable. The summer heat was oppressive, regularly reaching temperatures that made wearing full combat gear a form of torture. Dust storms rolled through the valley with frightening regularity, coating everything in a fine layer of grit that found its way into weapons, equipment, and every piece of food. Despite these challenges, the Marines at Chapman maintained their mission focus. They conducted daily patrols through the surrounding villages, worked to build relationships with local Afghan forces, and constantly watched the mountains for signs of enemy activity. The Taliban had adapted their tactics to take advantage of the terrain, using hit-and run attacks and sniper fire to inflict casualties while avoiding direct confrontation with superior American firepower. Maria's role in this environment was both crucial and controversial. As the base's primary sniper, she was responsible for providing overwatch during patrols, eliminating high-value targets, and gathering intelligence through long-range observation. Her position required her to work closely with male Marines in situations where trust and communication could mean the difference between life and death. The first few weeks passed without major incident, allowing Maria to settle into her new routine and begin building relationships with her fellow soldiers. She spent hours on the firing range, maintaining her edge and helping train other Marines in advanced marksmanship techniques. Her knowledge of ballistics, wind reading, and range estimation impressed even her harshest critics, though many remained skeptical about her ability to perform under real combat conditions. During this period, Maria also began working with her assigned spotter, Corporal David Chun, a 22-year-old Marine from California, on his second deployment. Chun had specifically requested to work with Maria after hearing about her reputation, much to the surprise of other Marines who considered the assignment career suicide. He was quiet and methodical, with an exceptional ability to read wind conditions and calculate firing solutions under pressure. The partnership between Maria and Chin developed quickly, built on mutual respect and shared dedication to their craft. They spent countless hours together, practicing communication protocols and studying the terrain around the base. Chin's youth and enthusiasm balanced Maria's experience and calm demeanor, creating a sniper team that other Marines gradually began to view with genuine respect rather than skeptical curiosity. As summer turned toward fall, the tactical situation around Chapman began to deteriorate. Taliban attacks increased in frequency and sophistication, with enemy snipers becoming particularly problematic. American casualties mounted, and morale among the Marines began to suffer as they found themselves under constant threat from an enemy they rarely saw and couldn't seem to counter effectively. It was during this period that intelligence reports began describing a new threat, a Taliban sniper operating from positions in the mountains who had already killed 6 American soldiers and twice that number of Afghan forces. The enemy marksman seemed to possess exceptional skill and intimate knowledge of the local terrain, appearing at different locations around the valley and striking with deadly precision before vanishing without a trace. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison called his senior staff together to discuss the threat and develop a response plan. The meeting took place in a cramped briefing room where maps covered every available wall space, and the air conditioning fought a losing battle against the heat outside. Present were the base's key leaders, the operations officer, intelligence officer, weapons company commander, and, after some debate, Maria as the senior sniper. The intelligence picture painted by the briefing was deeply troubling. The enemy sniper appeared to be using multiple firing positions scattered throughout the mountains, suggesting either exceptional mobility or the possibility of multiple shooters working in coordination. The targets had all been key personnel, squad leaders, radio operators, and Afghan interpreters whose deaths had maximum impact on American operations. Most concerning was the apparent skill level demonstrated by the attacks. Shot placement was consistently precise, with most targets struck center mass despite ranges that exceeded 600 meters. Wind conditions in the valley were notoriously difficult to predict, with gusts and thermal currents that could throw off even experienced marksmen, yet the enemy had shown remarkable accuracy in these challenging conditions. As the briefing continued, it became clear that previous attempts to locate and eliminate the threat had failed completely. Patrols sent to investigate suspected firing positions found nothing but empty mountainside. Counter-sniper teams had spent days in overwatch positions without detecting any enemy activity. Even drone surveillance had proven ineffective, with the enemy apparently skilled at avoiding detection from above. The frustration in the room was palpable as senior Marines discussed options that ranged from ineffective to impossible. Some suggested massive artillery strikes against suspected positions, but the mountains offered countless hiding spots, and civilian casualties were a constant concern. Others proposed restricting movement around the base, but this would effectively hand the Taliban a significant victory by limiting American operations. Maria listened to the discussion with growing concern. She understood the tactical challenge better than most, having spent years studying the art and science of precision shooting. The enemy they faced was clearly no amateur, and traditional counter-sniper tactics would likely prove insufficient against someone with this level of skill and local knowledge. When Lieutenant Colonel Harrison asked for her assessment, Maria spoke carefully, aware that her words would be scrutinized by Marines who still questioned her presence in their ranks. She outlined the technical challenges they faced, the extreme ranges involved, the difficult wind conditions, and the enemy's apparent ability to appear and disappear at will. More importantly, she emphasized that whoever they were facing possessed skills that demanded respect and careful planning to counter. The meeting ended without clear resolution, but Maria left with a growing sense that this situation would test everything she had learned about her profession. As she walked back to her quarters through the base's dusty pathways, she couldn't shake the feeling that her reputation and the trust of her fellow Marines would soon face their ultimate test. That night, as she cleaned and inspected her rifle under the harsh lights of her small room, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Every challenge she had overcome, every doubt she had silenced, every shot she had made under pressure had prepared her for moments like this. Whatever happened in the days ahead, she was ready to prove once again that skill and determination mattered more than gender when lives were on the line. The desert wind continued to howl outside her window, carrying with it the promise of the confrontation to come. The attack came at dawn on a Tuesday morning when the desert air still held the cool breath of night. Maria was already awake, sitting on the edge of her cot, while checking her equipment for the third time in an hour. She had learned long ago that sleepless nights often preceded the moments that defined a soldier's career, and something deep in her gut told her this would be one of those days. The alarm that shattered the morning quiet was not the usual wake-up call for the base. This was the urgent wailing that meant Marines were dying, the sound that sent every soldier scrambling for weapons and body armor regardless of what they had been doing moments before. Maria was dressed and moving toward the door before the second blast of the siren faded, her rifle already in her hands and her mind shifting into the focused state that combat demanded. Outside, the base had transformed into organized chaos. Marines ran between buildings, shouting orders and coordinating responses to whatever crisis had triggered the alarm. The morning briefing would later reveal that a patrol had been ambushed 3 kilometers from the base, with the enemy sniper claiming 2 more victims before disappearing back in the mountains that surrounded the valley like silent guardians. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's voice crackled over the base communications system, calling for an immediate response team to assist the pinned-down patrol. As Maria joined the Marines gathering near the motor pool, she noticed the mixture of anger and frustration on their faces. This enemy had become personal, a phantom that struck without warning and vanished without consequence, making every soldier feel vulnerable and exposed. The rescue convoy consisted of 4 armored vehicles carrying 20 Marines, including Maria and her spotter Chun. As they rolled through the base gates and into the hostile territory beyond, she studied the landscape through her scope, searching for any sign of the enemy that had plagued them for weeks. The mountains rose on all sides like ancient sentinels, their rocky faces hiding countless positions where a skilled marksman could remain concealed while commanding perfect fields of fire. The ambush site was a textbook example of tactical planning. The original patrol had been moving through a narrow valley when the attack commenced, with the enemy sniper positioned on high ground that offered multiple escape routes. By the time the rescue convoy arrived, the shooting had stopped, but the psychological damage was clear in the faces of the surviving Marines. Staff Sergeant Mike Reynolds, the patrol leader, briefed the rescue team with barely controlled rage in his voice. 2 of his Marines were dead, both killed with single shots that demonstrated the enemy's exceptional skill. The first victim had been the patrol's radio operator, struck while calling in a routine position report. The second had been Corporal Williams, a 20-year-old Marine from Ohio who had been trying to reach his wounded comrade when the sniper's bullet found him. As Reynolds described the attack, Maria found herself analyzing the enemy's tactics with professional interest despite the personal cost involved. The target selection showed tactical sophistication, eliminating the patrol's communications capability before striking again to prevent rescue attempts. The timing suggested patience and careful observation, with the sniper waiting for precisely the right moments to achieve maximum effect. More troubling was the apparent ease with which the enemy had escaped. Despite immediate attempts to locate the firing position, the patrol had found no trace of the sniper beyond a few scuff marks on a rocky outcrop 800 meters from the ambush site. By the time Marines reached that position, their opponent had vanished as completely as if he had never existed. The rescue operation proceeded with tense efficiency as Marines loaded the casualties into vehicles and prepared for the return journey to base. Maria remained on high alert throughout the process, scanning the surrounding mountains through her scope while Chun monitored radio communications and wind conditions. Every shadow, every movement of vegetation, every glint of reflected sunlight demanded investigation as potential signs of enemy activity. The convoy's return journey became a masterclass in tactical movement under threat. Vehicles maintained maximum spacing while traveling at speeds that balanced protection against ambush with a need to evacuate wounded Marines quickly. Air support circled overhead, though the pilots reported no visual contact with enemy forces despite intensive searching of suspected positions. Back at base, the mood was grim as Marines processed what had happened and prepared for the inevitable retaliation operations. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison convened an emergency meeting with his senior staff, including Maria, to discuss immediate response options. The briefing room that had seemed cramped during previous meetings now felt suffocating as frustrated officers debated courses of action that all seemed inadequate. Intelligence reports painted an increasingly troubling picture of their opponent. Analysis of the shooting positions suggested someone with extensive knowledge of the local terrain, possibly a former military sniper who had joined the Taliban after the fall of the Afghan government. The consistency of shot placement indicated exceptional training and equipment, with the enemy apparently using a high-quality rifle capable of precision at extreme ranges. Most concerning was the psychological impact the sniper was having on base operations. Marines who had previously moved with confidence now showed signs of stress and hypervigilance that could affect their combat effectiveness. Patrol leaders reported increased difficulty maintaining unit cohesion as soldiers became reluctant to expose themselves in areas where the sniper might be watching. During the briefing, several Marines proposed aggressive responses designed to draw the enemy into engagement. These range from sending out bait patrols to massive artillery strikes against suspected positions in the mountains. Maria listened to these suggestions with growing concern, recognizing them as emotional responses rather than tactical solutions to a complex problem. When asked for her professional assessment, Maria chose her words carefully. She explained that their opponent possessed skills that demanded respect and careful planning to counter effectively. Rushing into poorly planned operations would likely result in more casualties without achieving their objective of eliminating the threat. Instead, she suggested a more methodical approach based on detailed terrain analysis and careful observation of enemy patterns. Her recommendations met with mixed reactions from the other Marines. Some appreciated her tactical insights and professional approach to the problem. Others, particularly those who had lost friends to the enemy sniper, viewed her caution as weakness or reluctance to engage in combat. The tension in the room was palpable as career Marines struggled with the frustration of facing an enemy they could not see or effectively counter. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison ultimately decided to implement a two-pronged strategy. Increased patrols would attempt to locate and fix the enemy position, while Maria and her spotter would establish long-term observation posts designed to detect and engage the sniper when he next appeared. The plan was methodical and professional, but everyone in the room understood that it would likely require multiple encounters before achieving success. As the briefing concluded, Maria felt the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her fellow Marines would be watching her performance closely, ready to judge whether a woman could deliver when their lives depended on exceptional marksmanship under extreme pressure. The enemy sniper represented not just a tactical challenge, but a test of everything she had worked to prove during her military career. Over the following days, Maria and Chun established a series of observation posts around the base perimeter, each one carefully positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire across the most likely approaches for enemy attack. They spent hours studying the terrain through high-powered optics, memorizing every rock formation and vegetation pattern that might conceal a hidden marksman. The work was mentally and physically exhausting, requiring absolute concentration for extended periods while maintaining readiness to engage targets at extreme ranges. Desert conditions made the task even more challenging, with heat that could affect both human performance and equipment function, plus wind patterns that seemed to change without warning or apparent logic. During this period, Maria also worked to build relationships with Marines who remained skeptical about her abilities. She spent time on the firing range with various units, sharing her knowledge of advanced marksmanship techniques and demonstrating the skills that had earned her reputation. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the doubt began to fade as Marines witnessed her capabilities firsthand. Chun proved to be an invaluable partner during these long days of observation and preparation. His ability to read environmental conditions complemented Maria's shooting skills perfectly, creating a team that could engage targets under conditions that would challenge even experienced snipers. More importantly, his quiet confidence in her abilities helped counter some of the skepticism they faced from other Marines. The breakthrough came on a Thursday morning when Chun detected movement in a rocky outcrop approximately 1,000 meters from the base. Through careful observation over several hours, they confirmed the presence of at least one individual in a position that commanded excellent views of the base's main approaches. The tactical situation was clear. They had found their enemy. Maria studied the target area through her scope for nearly 30 minutes before confirming what Chun had spotted. The enemy position was expertly camouflaged, nearly invisible even when viewed through high-powered optics by someone who knew exactly where to look. Whoever had chosen that location possessed exceptional tactical knowledge and fieldcraft skills that rivaled anything she had encountered during her military career. The range to target was at the extreme limit of effective engagement, requiring precise calculation of ballistic factors and environmental conditions. Wind speed and direction were particularly challenging, with thermal currents rising from the valley floor creating unpredictable air movements that could throw off even perfectly aimed shots. Adding to the difficulty was the partial concealment of the target, who had positioned himself behind rocks that provided excellent protection while allowing observation of American positions. Maria began the careful process of preparing for what would likely be the most challenging shot of her career. She calculated range using multiple methods, confirmed wind readings with Chun, and studied the target's position for any patterns in movement or exposure that might provide a firing opportunity. The mathematics involved were complex, requiring consideration of bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric pressure, temperature, and a dozen other factors that could affect the projectile's path. As she worked through these calculations, Maria was acutely aware that Marines throughout the base were depending on her success. The enemy sniper had proven his ability to strike at will, killing American soldiers with impunity while remaining safely beyond retaliation. Her shot would not just eliminate a tactical threat, but also restore confidence in the unit's ability to protect itself and continue its mission. The waiting game that followed tested every aspect of Maria's training and experience. Professional snipers understood that patience was often more important than marksmanship, with the best opportunities sometimes requiring hours or even days to develop. She maintained her position behind the rifle scope while Chun monitored communications and environmental conditions, both of them ready to engage the moment their enemy provided a clear target. Hours passed without the enemy sniper showing himself clearly enough to justify taking the shot. Maria remained motionless behind her rifle, ignoring the heat, thirst, and physical discomfort that came with maintaining a firing position for extended periods. Her focus narrowed to the small circle of terrain visible through her scope, watching for any movement or change that might indicate her opponent's location. As the sun reached its zenith and the desert heat became almost unbearable, Maria finally detected the movement she had been waiting for. Through her scope, she saw the faint outline of a human figure adjusting position among the rocks, just visible enough to provide the targeting opportunity she needed. The enemy sniper was preparing for his own shot, probably at Marines who were completely unaware of the danger they faced. This was the moment that would define not just the outcome of their tactical situation, but Maria's entire military career. Everything she had trained for, every challenge she had overcome, every doubt she had faced about women in combat roles, came down to a single bullet, and her ability to place it exactly where it needed to go under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The moment of truth arrived with the subtlety of a shadow shifting across stone. Maria had been tracking the enemy sniper's position for nearly 6 hours when she finally saw what she had been waiting for, the unmistakable glint of a rifle scope catching the afternoon sun. Her target was preparing to take a shot of zone, probably aimed at Marines conducting a patrol exercise on the valley floor below, completely unaware that death was watching them from mountains. Through her own scope, Maria could see just enough of her opponent to confirm what she had suspected for weeks. This was no amateur fighter with an old hunting rifle. The enemy sniper was using professional-grade equipment and had positioned himself with the tactical sophistication of someone who had received advanced military training. His hide was nearly perfect, offering maximum concealment while providing clear fields of fire across multiple approaches to the base. Chen's voice was barely a whisper as he provided the final wind reading that would determine the success or failure of their mission. The crosswind was gusting unpredictably, shifting between 8 and 12 miles per hour from the northwest. At a range of just over 1,000 meters, even a small miscalculation could send Maria's bullet wide of its mark by several feet. There would be no second chance. The first shot would either eliminate the threat or alert their enemy to their position. Maria made minute adjustments to her scope settings, compensating for the extreme range and challenging environmental conditions. The mathematics involved were incredibly complex, requiring her to account for bullet drop that would measure in feet at this distance, wind drift that could push her projectile off target, and atmospheric conditions that affected both ballistic performance and optical clarity. Years of training and experience condensed into calculations that would determine the outcome of what had become a deadly game of chess played across mountain valleys. The physical demands of maintaining a precision shooting position for extended periods were testing the limits of Maria's endurance. Her muscles ached from holding the rifle steady for hours, and the desert heat had left her feeling dehydrated despite careful water management. Sweat threatened to cloud her vision or affect her grip on the weapon, while the sun's glare created optical challenges that made target identification even more difficult. But these physical discomforts faded into background noise as Maria entered the mental state that separated professional snipers from ordinary marksmen. Her world narrowed to the small circle of terrain visible through her scope, where every shadow and movement demanded instant analysis. Her breathing slowed to a controlled rhythm that would allow her to time her shot between heartbeats, minimizing the tiny movements that could throw off her aim at extreme range. Through her scope, Maria watched her target making final preparations for his own shot. The enemy sniper was clearly focused on targets in the valley below, completely unaware that he had become the hunted rather than the hunter. She could see enough of his position to know that he was lying prone behind a carefully constructed blind that used natural vegetation and artificial camouflage to remain invisible to casual observation. The tactical situation was reaching its climax, with both snipers preparing to fire at their respective targets. Maria's opponent had chosen his moment well, timing his attack to coincide with the patrol exercise when maximum numbers of Marines would be exposed in the valley below. His patience and planning demonstrated the professional approach that had made him such a deadly threat to American operations in the region. Maria's finger found the trigger of her M40A5 rifle, applying just enough pressure to take up the slack without firing. The weapon had been her constant companion for years, customized and adjusted until it felt like a natural extension of her body. She knew exactly how much pressure would release the firing pin and send her bullet toward its target, but timing that moment correctly required absolute precision and nerve. Chun continued to monitor wind conditions through his spotting scope, ready to provide last-minute corrections if the environmental situation changed. The partnership between sniper and spotter was critical to success at extreme ranges, requiring perfect communication and absolute trust in each other's abilities. Chin's youth and relative inexperience were offset by his exceptional eye for detail and natural understanding of ballistic principles. As Maria prepared to take her shot, she was acutely aware that Marines throughout the base were depending on her success. The enemy sniper had terrorized American forces for weeks, killing soldiers with impunity while remaining safely beyond retaliation. Her bullet would not just eliminate a tactical threat, but also demonstrate that American forces could adapt and overcome even the most challenging enemy tactics. The pressure of the moment extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Maria understood that her performance would be scrutinized by Marines who still questioned whether women belonged in combat roles, particularly in specialties that required exceptional physical and mental toughness. Every shot she had taken during her career had been evaluated through this lens, but never before had the stakes been so clearly defined or the consequences so visible. Through her scope, Maria saw her target beginning to shift position, probably preparing to take a shot at the Marines below. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the brief window when her enemy would be focused on his own target rather than watching for threats to his position. The opportunity might last only seconds, requiring split-second decision-making and flawless execution under extreme pressure. Maria began her final breathing sequence, the carefully practiced routine that would allow her to fire between heartbeats when her body was most stable. She drew a full breath, released half of it, and began applying pressure to the trigger. Her world contracted to the precise point where her crosshairs intersected with the barely visible outline of her target's head, the only part of his body exposed enough to provide a reliable aiming point. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley, the bullet beginning its journey through the hot desert air toward a target that was barely visible even through high-powered optics. Maria maintained her position behind the scope, watching through the brief moment when the projectile covered the distance between her position and the enemy hide. At extreme range, even bullets fired from high-velocity rifles took time to reach their targets, creating a suspended moment when success or failure hung in the balance. Chen watched through his spotting scope, ready to call the shot's impact and provide corrections for a follow-up if necessary. But as the seconds ticked by, it became clear that no second shot would be required. Through their optics, both Marines saw the enemy sniper's position suddenly go still, with no further movement or signs of activity from the hide that had concealed one of the Taliban's most effective fighters. The silence that followed was almost more dramatic than the shot itself. For weeks, the base had lived under the constant threat of sniper attack, with Marines looking over their shoulders and moving with the careful tension of soldiers who knew death could strike without warning. Now, suddenly, that threat had been eliminated by a single well-placed bullet fired under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Maria remained in position for several minutes, continuing to observe the target area through her scope while Chun monitored radio communications from a base. Confirmation of the kill would require physical inspection of the enemy position, but both Marines were confident that their mission had been successful. The enemy sniper's complete lack of movement and the absence of any return fire suggested that Maria's bullet had found its mark with deadly precision. As word of the successful engagement spread throughout the base, Maria began the careful process of securing her equipment and preparing to return to friendly lines. The long hours of observation and the stress of taking an extremely difficult shot had left her physically and emotionally drained, but she maintained the professional composure that had characterized her entire military career. The patrol sent to investigate the enemy position confirmed what Maria and Chen already knew. The Taliban sniper lay dead behind his carefully constructed hide, killed instantly by a bullet that had traveled over 1,000 meters through challenging conditions to find its target with surgical precision. The enemy fighter was indeed a professional, equipped with a high-quality rifle and extensive ammunition, along with intelligence materials that would prove valuable for future operations. News of Maria's successful shot spread quickly through the Marine Corps community, both at the base and in communications with higher headquarters. The elimination of a threat that had plagued American operations for weeks was significant enough, but the circumstances surrounding the engagement made the story even more remarkable. Where an entire squad of experienced male Marines had failed to locate or engage their enemy, one woman with exceptional skill and unshakable nerve had succeeded under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, who had initially opposed Maria's assignment to his unit, was among the first to congratulate her on the successful mission. His change in attitude reflected a broader shift in perception among Marines who had witnessed her professional performance under extreme pressure. The skepticism and doubt that had followed Maria throughout her career were replaced by genuine respect for her abilities and recognition of her contribution to unit effectiveness. For Maria herself, the successful shot represented validation of everything she had worked to achieve during her military career. Every challenge she had faced, every doubt she had overcome, every moment when she had been forced to prove herself under conditions that her male counterparts never encountered, had prepared her for this moment when lives depended on exceptional performance under pressure. But even as she accepted congratulations from fellow Marines, Maria remained focused on the broader mission and the challenges that lay ahead. The enemy sniper had been eliminated, but the Taliban would undoubtedly attempt to replace him with another fighter. The war would continue, and American forces would face new threats that required constant vigilance and professional competence to overcome. As evening fell over Forward Operating Base Chapman, Maria cleaned and inspected her rifle with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized her approach to every aspect of her military service. The weapon had performed flawlessly during the most important shot of her career, but maintaining its reliability required constant care and attention. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve her fellow Marines and her country. The desert wind continued to blow across the valley, but the psychological atmosphere at the base had changed completely. Marines who had moved with tension and hypervigilance for weeks now showed the confidence and esprit de corps that came with knowing their unit could protect itself against even the most sophisticated enemy threats. Maria's single shot had eliminated more than just one enemy fighter. It had restored faith in American capabilities and demonstrated once again that skill and determination mattered more than gender when lives were on the line. The intelligence gathered from the dead enemy sniper's position painted a disturbing picture that went far beyond what anyone at Forward Operating Base Chapman had imagined. Maria stood in the briefing room 3 days after her successful shot, studying photographs and documents that revealed the true scope of the threat they had been facing. The Taliban fighter she had eliminated was not just a skilled marksman, but part of a larger network that had been systematically targeting American operations throughout the region. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison spread the capture materials across the briefing table with the careful precision of someone handling evidence in a criminal investigation. Maps marked with observation points, patrol schedules written in neat handwriting, and photographs of key American personnel painted the portrait of an intelligence operation that had been monitoring their base for months. The enemy sniper had been the operational arm of a sophisticated surveillance network that knew far more about Marine activities than anyone had suspected. Most unsettling were the target lists found among the enemy's possessions. Names, ranks, and detailed descriptions of key American personnel were written in careful script, including information that could only have been gathered through extensive observation or inside sources. Maria's own name appeared on one of the lists, identified as the primary sniper threat at the base, and marked with notations about her daily routines and preferred observation positions. The photographs were equally troubling, showing detailed images of the base's defensive positions, key personnel, and patrol patterns. Some had been taken from concealed positions in the mountains, while others suggested the photographer had been much closer to American positions than anyone had realized. The quality and detail of the surveillance materials indicated professional training and access to high-end equipment that went beyond typical Taliban capabilities. Among the most significant discoveries were communications intercepts that revealed the dead sniper's connection to a larger network operating throughout Afghanistan. The documents included references to training camps where foreign fighters received advanced instruction in marksmanship and tactics, funded and equipped by organizations with sophisticated intelligence capabilities. Maria's successful shot had eliminated more than just one enemy fighter. It had disrupted a node in a network that threatened American operations across multiple provinces. The revelation that their enemy had been part of a larger operation forced a complete reassessment of the tactical situation around Forward Operating Base Chapman. What Marines had initially viewed as harassment by a single skilled fighter was actually coordinated surveillance and targeting by an organized network with significant resources and professional training. The implications for base security and operational planning were staggering. Maria found herself at the center of discussions about how to respond to this new intelligence. Her successful engagement with the enemy sniper had demonstrated capabilities that higher command wanted to leverage in operations against the broader network. Plans were already being developed for expanded missions that would take her beyond the relatively controlled environment around the base and into more dangerous territory where the enemy network maintained active operations. The prospect of expanded missions brought both opportunity and concern for Maria's future. Her proven abilities under extreme pressure made her an obvious choice for operations that required exceptional marksmanship and nerve, but she was also aware that success often led to increasingly dangerous assignments. The military had a way of placing its most capable personnel in situations where those capabilities were tested to their absolute limits. During this period, Maria's relationship with her fellow Marines continued to evolve in ways that reflected changing attitudes toward women in combat roles. The skepticism and doubt that had characterized her early days at the base had been replaced by genuine respect and professional recognition. Marines who had once questioned her presence in their unit now actively sought her input on tactical planning and requested her assistance with advanced marksmanship training. Corporal Chun had emerged as one of Maria's strongest advocates, using his position as her spotter to share detailed accounts of her professional capabilities with other Marines. His first-hand observations of her performance under pressure carried weight with soldiers who might have dismissed similar accounts from other sources. The partnership between Maria and Chun had become a model for effective sniper team operations that other units were beginning to emulate. The success of Maria's mission also attracted attention from higher levels of command, with requests for detailed reports on her techniques and tactical approaches. Marine Corps Headquarters was particularly interested in lessons learned from the engagement, especially regarding the challenges of long-range shooting under desert conditions. Maria found herself writing technical reports and participating in briefings that would influence sniper training and doctrine throughout the military. But recognition and professional success came with personal costs that were often invisible to those who celebrated her achievements. The psychological weight of taking human life, even in warfare, created burdens that no amount of training could fully prepare someone to carry. Maria had learned to manage these pressures during her previous deployments, but each successful mission added another layer to the emotional complexity of her role as a professional killer. The isolation that came with her exceptional abilities also created challenges that her male counterparts rarely faced. While other Marines could bond over shared experiences of fear, doubt, and vulnerability in combat, Maria's reputation for calm competence under pressure sometimes made her seem superhuman rather than relatable. Building genuine friendships with fellow soldiers required careful navigation of perceptions and expectations that could make normal social interactions complicated. Sleep became increasingly difficult in the weeks following her successful shot, with dreams that mixed pride in professional accomplishment with haunting images of the enemy she had killed. Maria had learned to compartmentalize these experiences during previous deployments, but the extreme range and challenging conditions of her latest engagement had created memories that were particularly vivid and persistent. She managed these psychological challenges with the same methodical approach she applied to every aspect of her military service, but the emotional cost was real and accumulating. The base's improved security situation following the elimination of the enemy sniper created new opportunities for expanded operations in the surrounding area. Patrols that had been restricted to relatively safe routes could now venture into previously dangerous territory, gathering intelligence and building relationships with local populations that had been isolated by Taliban intimidation tactics. Maria's role in these expanded operations was crucial, providing overwatch and precision engagement capabilities that allowed other Marines to operate with greater confidence and effectiveness. During one such mission, Maria and Chun established an observation post overlooking a village where intelligence reports suggested Taliban fighters were operating. The mission required them to remain concealed for 3 days while monitoring enemy activity and gathering information about local support networks. The physical demands were significant, requiring them to remain motionless for extended periods while maintaining constant vigilance for threats to their position. On the second night of the mission, Maria detected movement in the village that suggested preparation for an attack against American forces. Through her night vision scope, she observed armed fighters gathering weapons and equipment while discussing what appeared to be operational planning. The intelligence value of this observation was enormous, but acting on it would require careful coordination with base command to avoid compromising their concealed position. The communication protocols for such situations were complex, requiring coded transmissions that would not alert enemy forces to American surveillance capabilities. Maria and Chun worked together to document the enemy activity they observed while maintaining the absolute silence that kept their position secure. The information they gathered over the following hours would prove crucial for disrupting planned attacks against American forces throughout the region. When the mission concluded and they returned to base, Maria's reports provided intelligence analysts with detailed information about enemy tactics, equipment, and personnel that filled significant gaps in their understanding of Taliban operations. The success of the mission reinforced her reputation as a soldier who could deliver exceptional results under the most challenging conditions, but it also ensured that future assignments would be equally demanding and dangerous. As autumn progressed toward winter in the mountains of Afghanistan, Maria received orders for her next assignment that would test her abilities in entirely new ways. Intelligence had identified a high-value target operating from a mountain fortress that commanded strategic approaches through a key mountain pass. The target was described as a Taliban leader with extensive training and significant influence over operations throughout the region. The mission would require Maria to operate at extreme range under conditions that pushed the limits of current sniper technology and techniques. The target's location was protected by natural terrain features that made approach extremely difficult, while weather conditions in the mountains created atmospheric challenges that could affect bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. Success would require not just exceptional marksmanship, but also careful planning and flawless execution under pressure that exceeded anything Maria had previously encountered. Preparation for the mission consumed weeks of planning and rehearsal, with Maria and Chun working with intelligence analysts, meteorologists, and ballistics experts to develop firing solutions for shots that would challenge the fundamental limitations of their equipment. Wind patterns in the mountain pass were particularly problematic, with thermal currents and terrain effects creating conditions that could change dramatically without warning. The personal stakes involved in the mission extended beyond tactical considerations to broader questions about the role of women in military operations. Success would further demonstrate female capabilities in combat roles that had traditionally been limited to men, while failure could be used to question women's suitability for the most demanding military assignments. Maria understood these implications, but remained focused on the professional requirements of her mission rather than the political ramifications of her performance. As the date for the mission approached, Maria found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. Every challenge she had overcome, every shot she had taken under pressure, every moment when she had been forced to prove her capabilities had prepared her for assignments that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. The young woman who had walked into a recruiting office years earlier had become a professional warrior whose skills were respected throughout the military community. But she also understood that each success brought new challenges and higher expectations that could never be fully satisfied. The military would continue to test her limits with increasingly difficult assignments until either her capabilities were exceeded or her career ended. The price of exceptional performance was constant pressure to perform at levels that few soldiers could maintain indefinitely. The mountain fortress perched on a rocky outcrop like an ancient eagle's nest, commanding views across valleys that stretched toward Pakistan's lawless tribal regions. Maria studied the target through her scope from a concealed position nearly 1,500 meters away, calculating angles and atmospheric conditions for what would undoubtedly be the most challenging shot of her military career. The Taliban leader they had been sent to eliminate was visible only as a distant figure moving between stone buildings that had been carved from the mountain itself centuries earlier. 3 weeks of intensive planning had brought Maria and Chun to this moment, along with a 12-man security team that had spent 4 days moving through hostile territory to establish their current position. The approach had required traveling through terrain that challenged even experienced mountain fighters, crossing ridges and valleys where a single misstep could trigger avalanches or alert enemy forces to their presence. Every piece of equipment had been carefully selected and tested to ensure reliable performance under conditions that pushed both human and mechanical limits. The intelligence picture surrounding their target was both comprehensive and deeply troubling. Khalid Hassan was a former Afghan military officer who had joined the Taliban after the fall of Kabul, bringing with him tactical knowledge and training that had made him one of the organization's most effective regional commanders. His mountain stronghold had become a planning center for operations throughout eastern Afghanistan, with his influence extending across tribal networks that had resisted foreign control for centuries. Hassan's personal history made him particularly dangerous to American operations. His military training included advanced courses in tactics and strategy, while his tribal connections provided him with intelligence networks that penetrated deep into areas supposedly under government control. The sniper that Maria had eliminated weeks earlier had been one of many fighters trained and equipped through Hassan's network, which explained the professional quality of equipment and tactics they had encountered. The fortress itself represented a tactical challenge that had stumped military planners for months. Built into natural rock formations that provided exceptional protection against conventional attack, the compound could only be approached through narrow mountain passes that were easily defended by small numbers of fighters. Previous attempts to eliminate Hassan had failed due to the site's natural advantages and the leader's careful security protocols that made him nearly impossible to target. Maria's mission represented a calculated gamble by higher command that exceptional marksmanship could succeed where conventional military operations had failed. The extreme range involved pushed the absolute limits of current sniper technology, requiring perfect conditions and flawless execution to achieve success. Weather reports indicated a brief window of opportunity when atmospheric conditions might allow for the precision shot that tactical success demanded. The physical demands of reaching their current position had tested every member of the team to their limits. The approach march had required carrying specialized equipment through terrain where pack animals could not survive, with each Marine bearing load that exceeded normal standards for mountain operations. Sleep had been impossible during the final approach, with the team moving through darkness across ridges where enemy observation posts could detect any movement during daylight hours. Chun had proven invaluable during the approach, using his technical knowledge to establish communication with base while maintaining the absolute silence that operational security required. His ability to read environmental conditions had become even more critical at extreme altitude, where atmospheric pressure and wind patterns created challenges that could affect bullet trajectory in ways that sea-level training had not prepared them for. The partnership between Maria and Chun had evolved into something approaching telepathic communication, with each understanding the other's needs and capabilities without requiring verbal coordination. The security team accompanying them consisted of Marines selected for their mountain warfare expertise and absolute reliability under extreme pressure. Their mission was to provide protection while Maria prepared and executed her shot, then ensure the team's safe withdrawal through hostile territory where enemy response would be swift and overwhelming. Each Marine understood that success depended on precise timing and flawless coordination under conditions where mistakes would likely be fatal. As Maria settled into her final shooting position, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every shot she had taken during her military career had been preparation for engagements like this, where exceptional skill under pressure could accomplish what entire military units could not achieve through conventional means. The young woman who had learned to shoot in Texas pastures had become a strategic asset whose capabilities were recognized at the highest levels of military command. The mathematical calculations required for the shot involved variables that pushed theoretical knowledge to its practical limits. Bullet drop at 1,500 meters would measure in yards rather than feet, requiring precise elevation adjustments based on atmospheric conditions that could change dramatically with altitude and temperature. Wind effects were even more complex, with mountain thermal currents creating conditions that could shift unpredictably throughout the day. Maria had spent hours studying weather patterns and atmospheric data, working with Chun to develop firing solutions that accounted for every measurable variable affecting bullet trajectory. But she also understood that some factors could not be calculated in advance, requiring split-second adjustments based on environmental observations at the moment of firing. The margin for error was essentially zero, with any miscalculation resulting in mission failure and likely compromising the team's security. Through her scope, Maria watched Hassan moving between buildings in what appeared to be a routine inspection of his mountain stronghold. Intelligence reports suggested he maintained regular schedules that included personal oversight of defensive preparations and communication with subordinate commanders throughout his network. These routines provided the predictability that made targeting possible, though his security protocols included countermeasures designed to prevent exactly the kind of precision engagement Maria was preparing to execute. The waiting period that preceded the shot tested every aspect of Maria's mental and physical preparation. Professional snipers understood that patience was often more important than marksmanship, with the difference between success and failure sometimes measured in minutes or hours rather than inches of accuracy. She maintained her position behind the rifle while monitoring environmental conditions and watching for the brief moment when all factors would align to provide the opportunity she needed. Chen's role during this period was equally critical, monitoring wind conditions and atmospheric changes while maintaining communication with the security team positioned to cover their withdrawal. His spotting scope provided detailed observation of the target area, allowing him to confirm range estimates and identify the precise moment when Hassan would provide the clear targeting opportunity that mission success required. The coordination between sniper and spotter had become so seamless that external observers would have difficulty determining where one Marine's responsibilities ended and the others began. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen across the valley below, Maria detected the movement she had been waiting for. Hassan emerged from one of the stone buildings and moved toward an observation post that would provide her with the clear shot she needed. The distance remained extreme, but atmospheric conditions had stabilized in ways that made precision engagement theoretically possible. This was the moment that weeks of planning and preparation had been designed to create. Maria began her final breathing sequence, the carefully practiced routine that would allow her to fire when her body was most stable. The rifle felt familiar in her hands despite the exotic location and extreme conditions, a trusted tool that had never failed her when precision mattered most. Her world contracted to the precise point where her crosshairs intersected with the distant figure of the man who had orchestrated attacks against American forces throughout the region. The shot broke cleanly, sending a bullet on a trajectory that would either make military history or represent one of the most spectacular failures in modern sniper operations. At extreme range, Even projectiles fired from high-velocity rifles required significant time to reach their targets, creating suspended moments when success or failure hung in the balance while physics and precision marksmanship determined the outcome. Through his spotting scope, Chen watched the bullet's impact with the clinical detachment of a professional observer, ready to call corrections for a follow-up shot if necessary. But as the seconds ticked by, it became clear that no second shot would be required. The target area had gone completely still, with no movement or signs of activity from the position where Hassan had been standing moments before. Confirmation of the successful engagement came through multiple sources over the following hours. Intercepted enemy communications described confusion and panic within the Taliban network as news of Hassan's death spread throughout the region. Intelligence analysts reported immediate disruption of planned operations as subordinate commanders struggled to maintain coordination without their leader's central authority. The single bullet that Maria had sent across 1,500 meters of mountain air had achieved strategic effects that entire military operations had failed to accomplish. The withdrawal from their mountain position required the same careful planning and execution that had characterized the approach, with the team moving through hostile territory where enemy forces would be desperately searching for the source of the attack that had eliminated one of their most important leaders. Maria's successful shot had accomplished its tactical objective, but the team's survival depended on reaching friendly lines before Taliban fighters could locate and eliminate them. The journey back to base took 5 days of careful movement through terrain that offered concealment, but also presented natural challenges that tested human endurance to its limits. Each member of the team understood that their success depended on maintaining the discipline and coordination that had characterized the entire mission, with no room for mistakes or relaxation until they reached the safety of American lines. When the team finally arrived at Forward Operating Base Chapman, Maria found herself at the center of celebrations that reflected both relief at their safe return and recognition of the strategic significance of their mission. Hassan's elimination had disrupted Taliban operations throughout the region, while demonstrating American capabilities to conduct precision operations under conditions that many had considered impossible. For Maria personally, the successful mission represented the culmination of everything she had worked to achieve during her military career. The doubts and skepticism that had followed her from basic training through multiple deployments had been replaced by recognition as one of the most capable snipers in Marine Corps history. Her gender had become irrelevant compared to her proven ability to deliver exceptional results under the most challenging conditions imaginable. But even as she accepted congratulations from fellow Marines and higher command, Maria remained focused on the broader mission and the ongoing war that would continue regardless of individual achievements. The enemy would adapt and evolve, presenting new challenges that would require continued vigilance and professional excellence to overcome. Her successful shots had eliminated specific threats and saved American lives, but the fundamental struggle would continue as long as American forces remained committed to operations in Afghanistan. As she cleaned and inspected her rifle after the mission, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought a small-town girl from Texas to mountain peaks in Afghanistan, where single bullets could influence strategic outcomes. The weapon in her hands represented more than just advanced military technology. It was a tool that had allowed her to protect fellow soldiers and serve her country in ways that had seemed impossible when she first walked into that recruiting office years earlier. The desert wind continued to blow across the valleys of Afghanistan, carrying with it the promise of future challenges and opportunities that would test every lesson she had learned during her military career. But Maria faced that uncertain future with the confidence that came from proven performance under pressure, knowing that her skills and determination had earned her a place among the elite warriors who shaped the outcome of America's most important battles.